All right. Hello, people of YouTube land. Hello to those that are part of the Cringe Crew community Discord, and the people who follow Ted and I on Twitch. And hello to whomever is listening to this on Spotify or wherever else we decide to put this on. I am Traductus.
I'm Ted.
And this is the Cringe Crew Gaming Movie Review Podcast, where we take a director's filmography and review each movie one by one, go over the background info, and talk about what we like and dislike about the movie. If you've been following along or actually read the description, you would know that we are covering Sam Raimi. And if you actually paid attention to reading the title, you'd know that the movie that we are reviewing is Darkman. Darkman, released August 24th, 1990. Darkman had a budget of $14 million and had a box office return of $48.9 million. Originally, Raimi intended to make a film adaptation of either Batman or The Shadow, but was unable to do so since he was unable to get the rights to make either movie. Although both superheroes ended up having like a movie adaptation, with obviously the Batman one being very well received, especially since, like, if I remember right, aren't they trying to do like a Batman movie now with Michael Keaton?
Are they? I hadn't heard that, but
I've always heard rumors that they were going to try to like bring in like the Michael Keaton Batman with like the Robert Pattinson and the Ben Affleck one or some weird shit. Who knows? Who the fuck knows when it comes to like whoever owns like the film rights to DC movies?
dude, I cannot imagine like Michael Keaton suiting up as Batman at this point in time. That would just be such a sad fucking film. Oh.
Yeah, but and the adaptation of The Shadow ended up having like Alec Baldwin as the Shadow, which, if I remember, that movie was pretty fucking bad. But anyway, due to not obtaining the rights, he made his own superhero. Originally, it was a 30-page short story, but the more that Raimi worked on it, the idea of Darkman evolved into a film script, which Raimi pitched to Universal Pictures. Universal liked the script that he was not finished with. He actually sent them an unfinished movie script, and then they liked everything so far, and then greenlit the project and had him finish it. The story itself was not only influenced by superheroes like The Shadow and Batman, but also Universal monster movies such as The Phantom of the Opera and Frankenstein, and also the David Lynch film The Elephant Man. Now we're going into casting. Now, originally, Raimi wanted Bruce Campbell to play the part of Darkman. Wow, shocker! This seems to be a growing trend.
Somehow the fucker still makes it into the movie anyway.
But the studio rejected the idea, not thinking he could carry the role. But Campbell does make a cameo at the end of the movie.
Fucker.
Now, two other people besides Liam Neeson were considered for the role. One of them being Gary Oldman, and the other, which is funny, Bill Paxton. Bill Paxton could not do this fucking role at all. Now, Gary Oldman sounds interesting.
I don't know, man. Neeson isn't a bad cast there. It's just no matter who you put here, if they're worth a damn, it gets wasted.
Yeah, it's not very well written. But Liam Neeson ends up getting chosen for the part since Raimi liked Neeson's Gary Cooper like charisma, and quote was looking for someone who could be suggested a monster with a soul of a man and needed an actor that could portray that under the makeup. This was Liam Neeson's first lead role in an action film, and Neeson had to act in a 10-piece prosthetic makeup, and at times had to be in the makeup for like 18 hours a day. He said that the hardest thing during shooting was speaking with the false teeth in his mouth, because he had to like try really, really hard without having them like move and make them look extremely unrealistic. The love interest in the movie, Julie Hastings, is played by Frances McDormand, who's known for her roles in Fargo and Burn After Reading, both directed by the Coen brothers. Raimi wanted McDormand from the start, but the studio resisted due to the fact that they wanted Julia Roberts, since she just got done with like her hit Pretty Woman, and they also considered Demi Moore for the role. Bridget Fonda tested for the role, but Raimi felt that she was too young for the role compared to, the other star being Liam Neeson. So, kudos to Raimi to know that that big giant age gaps are fucking creepy.
Dude, we are already so much better than Tarantino. Good lord.
Raimi and McDormand frequently butted heads during filming, due to the fact that they had different opinions on how the film would be should be. As in, they both wanted to make a great film. They just had different opinions on that. However, Raimi and McDormand remained friends afterwards, despite, pretty much yelling at each other throughout filming. The villains, being Louis Track Jr. and Robert G. Durant, were played by Colin Friels and Larry Drake. I have no information on how Colin Friels got cast for the role, but Drake, who's best known for his role in L.A. Law, got the part. Dude, even though Raimi was unfamiliar with the TV series, he just basically cast him because he looked like Edward G. Robinson, who's the guy that played Rico in the gangster film Little Caesar. And if you haven't seen that, it's where the whole, thing comes from. So that should kind of, bring upon, dude looked like a stereotypical, mafia gangster that people think of from the 1920s, of old 1920s movies. Of course, saying Little Caesars is 1930, but whatever. The character of Durant ends up given the trademark of having a finger collection due to the fact that Raimi wanted to give hints that Durant had a military background, as if the one scene with him shooting at Darkman with a fucking grenade launcher wasn't a dead giveaway.
I also just how does a finger collection tie him to a military background? I'm 99% sure that soldiers don't just capture fingers. I'll leave that alone.
No, I deliberately put that in the script to lead you on to see if you would actually make a snarky comment
Go
like
fuck
that.
yourself, Stallman. Go fuck yourself.
No, and by the way, I didn't make that up. That was Raimi's description, but I'm that has to be put in there to set Ted up. So.
Just, man, God, fuck.
Like Crimewave, Raimi experienced difficulties in the editing process due to partial studio interference, although it wasn't as bad as it was in Crimewave. The editor that was assigned to him was editing the film but ignoring all the storyboards, so him and Raimi got into a huge argument, which resulted in the editor having a panic attack and leaving post-production. That, and also the studio ended up pressuring Raimi to re-edit the movie to their liking after some less than ideal screen tests. Although, due to these screen tests, they had multiple people doing different scores for the movie, and since test audiences received well to the musical score that Danny Elfman did, his score from the movie ends up being in the final cut, and Danny Elfman is the guy that was in a new wave band called Oingo Boingo, if anybody's familiar with that, but he's probably more familiar with doing a lot of the music for Tim Burton movies, including Batman. I think he did Edward Scissorhands. If I'm not mistaken, he did Nightmare Before Christmas.
Couldn't tell you. I had no idea offhand.
But since the release of the movie, Darkman has spawned 2 direct-to-DVD sequels, which I haven't seen, and also came to have a comic book series of its own. So, therefore, pretty much became a media franchise. So, that being said, we're going to go into likes and dislikes and rankings and tell you what we think about this movie.
Plot. You miss this every week.
Shit! Maybe I should write that in the script. Plot.
It is the kind of important parts of watching movies.
Because before when I didn't prepare for this, I would get like, oh yeah, now we're in the plot. Now that I prepare and write this shit down, I'm like, fuck Ted's section.
It's all good. So the plot of this one is relatively simple. Liam Neeson's character plays a scientist who's trying to essentially create replacement skin in a prosthetic setting. This crime syndicate is what I'm going to call them, to be polite. This crime syndicate is looking for some letter that his reporter girlfriend or journalist girlfriend has.
She's a lawyer.
Whatever the fuck she is. The important part of her being in this movie is a piece of paper and a plot driver, okay? Her career could be a fucking barista, but she's got this goddamn letter. It doesn't matter. Anyway... so they're trying to obtain this letter so that they can build this addition to the city and make lots of money. That part's kind of weak, but then he uses his newly burned and exploded face from them trying to steal this document back from his lab / apartment / coffee shop, and then he turns into some superhero using his own science to try and stop these people kind of creatively. And that's the plot. Pretty simple. Yeah, more or less. Now we can get into likes and dislikes and talk about what we enjoyed or didn't enjoy during the movie. I kind of want to start with likes. I think the pretty solid and obvious one here is that it's really just a simple origin story, honestly. I think that it becomes more attainable to an audience that isn't necessarily in an age where we've got 743 Marvel movies in the last decade to be like, hey, this dude is a scientist trying to help people, and that leads to him trying to save people, right?
Yeah, and I think during this time, prior to this, what was, the only one that was, really big was Superman, and then, and from this era, there were, this was basically kind of, the prototype of, before we get into, the big Marvel shit.
Right, and certain superhero movies, kind of force you into already knowing an origin story. I mean, as much as we raved about the Batman movies when we were doing Christopher Nolan for this podcast, right? The origin story wasn't great. It's just that Batman had been publicized enough that, we already know that, Robert shot his parents. He's, whatever, right? Batman's not a hard one to pull off, but it's also not attainable. It's not approachable. And in an era where there aren't a million different superhero movies out everywhere, right? It's really nice to have it he's a scientist who helps people. He uses his technology to further help people and himself, right? It's super approachable, super bite-sized, not super complicated. You don't have to follow this really complex train of thought. You're already established with the baseline before you ever recognize that it's a superhero movie, right?
Right.
I think that's the big and obvious takeaway for this one for me. As far as the film goes, the filmography, lighting is pretty good. Sound is mostly reasonable. I think that the prosthetics are actually really fantastic, especially considering what we've seen from other Raimi movies. Yeah. I mean, this was a step above. I wouldn't say that it's Evil Dead good necessarily, but other than that, this is pretty up there.
Yeah, especially also when they showed the
holograms. Yeah.
With that just being 1990, That's impressive.
And it held up, right? Like, you could tell it was very clearly digitized, right? But it's not like your office training VHS from 1994 that your company hasn't needed to update kind of bad technology, right? Like, it looks like it was made in the 90s, but it doesn't look like it should have stayed in the 90s. It's
Right.
really good.
It's not like the music video for Money for Nothing where everything's all freaking just blocks.
Yeah. I will say that I don't know how to make this not a negative, but to still say it out loud. I don't think that the negatives, the detractions, the bad editing, the weird corny shit gets in the way of the plot. And I think that, like, because everything is so bite-sized, even the stuff that, like, okay, so we mentioned the fingers getting cut off earlier, right?
Yeah, I actually like how, like, you know, one of the two main villains, like, I love how, like, they don't give a lot of, like, he's not, like, 100% like fleshed out, like, you know, he's not it's not like they give like some elaborate backstory with him. It's like, yeah, he's like the head of a crime syndicate and he cuts off people's fingers and has a finger collection.
Well, right, but
like
but like that's just it for me, right? Is that, like, there's no reason for him to have a finger collection. Even if they use the finger thing as torture to establish that he's ruthless, you don't need to show a box full of fingers later in the movie. It's just kind of bad editing that's stupid to leave it in. But it doesn't get in the way. It doesn't make you ask unnecessary questions.
To me, it makes him look, I mean, it makes him seem a little bit more interesting, but, like, at the same time, like, it's not like they focus too much upon it, you know, where it's distracting.
And it's also, like, because this is the first of you called it a media franchise. I don't know that I would take it that far, right? But, like, when you establish the Joker for the first time in the Batman comics, knowing he's going to be a recurring character, you kind of have to develop him. And in this one, like, this might just be a throwaway movie. I know you said that there are follow-ups, like a comic book and two more, you know, straight-to-home movies, right? But, like...
Yeah, neither which have Raimi's... I mean, he might have produced them, but, like, he's not the director.
Right, either way, like, if this villain's going to recur, yeah, they have a decent place to start, right? But also, like, it doesn't get in the way of this movie where it's like, well, you have to watch the sequels to see what happens to the villain because we've established him and he's important now. Like, it doesn't get in its own way, even with the things that are bad about it. And I kind of like that. And
I don't like how, like, even, like, the different side villains, like, there's, like, a guy that has, like, one leg that's a gun. But, like, they have, like, I mean, they're basically just, like, henchmen, but they don't really have, like, much to do, but they have, like, different, like, iconic things where they seem like your typical, like, superhero henchmen that have, like, their different supervillain, like, henchmen that have, like, different quirks, but so, like, they stand out even though that they don't really have any backstory whatsoever. They're just they've got thugs that are interesting.
They've got intricacies, and I think it's in a positive way. I'll give you that. What else do you have for likes before I start slowly moving downhill?
I'd say I think Liam Neeson does an okay job for the most part. There's a couple discrepancies that I do have with Liam Neeson, but, like, and it's not really his fault. It's just certain scenes that kind of come out of, you know, nowhere if you're not paying attention to things, and it's more so about, like, what's written as opposed to his acting. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that this is going to sound insane. I think this is one of the best times I've ever seen Liam Neeson convey emotion. He's had more successful roles and certainly better acting, right? But he's also been given more. Even in Taken, when his family gets abducted, right? There's no emotion. It's just kind of cold, callous, halfway Irish accent on the phone, right? And, like, this one, I think, like, when there are emotional parts, he conveys emotion. And I think Neeson does pretty successfully with what he's given, despite it being a flaming bag of dog shit.
That's basically what I got.
All right. So for dislikes, the story itself is fine. Like I said, super approachable, easy to digest. nice starter layer, right? The storytelling is incredibly weak.
Although I do like how we start off with the villain, right? I mean, like, you know, at least the first out of the two like main villains in this right away. I think that's cool that they introduced the villain for, you know, but like how we get to like a lot of things is
you know, it's just like, okay, there's a lot of like, all right, there's a twist in this movie where the guy who is presenting as the lead villain is actually working for another guy who you think is just kind of like a story driver, right? I mean, he's not a great guy, but he's also just kind of driving the story the first couple of times you see him, right? So the issue is that like it's not this big whole like suspenseful twist. Like it's, yeah, you saw the piece of paper on my desk and now you know I am the bad guy, right? And like, again, the story is good. When they storyboarded this, I'm guessing this was like, holy shit, boys, we did it, right? When they go to actually like fill in the details to tell the storytelling elements are weak and unemphasized, right?
Yeah.
I think that there are a lot of things that, like I mentioned earlier, there are some distractions, there are some editing questions, there are just not good chunks of this movie in terms of how they decide to give you what is the point. And I find that a little bit distracting while watching this.
And on top of that, like, there's also descriptions of like more or less like where how they're describing like Darkman, how he actually does. I mean, not just like, I mean, the able to use prosthetic faces that, you know, last like only up to 90 minutes in the daytime. Like during night, he can like wear them indefinitely. I mean, that's well explained, but as in like him not feeling pain and him losing control of his emotions, especially anger.
To that point, man, it almost feels like
that was like a throwaway line where he's in the hospital.
It also feels like a Superman plot, dude. Like in the idea that like, hey, I saw a Superman comic and he's already got every power except laser sight. How's he gonna get they gave him laser sight too. Fuck. Like the super strength and the not feeling pain and whatever else comes in for like 4 seconds apiece. Like it's such a throwaway that it does, like, you have forgotten that it happens for the 4 seconds he needs it. And I find that, like, again, really bad piecing in the story. Yeah,
and like there's a part in this movie where like it just kind of goes into like kind of like a Nicolas Cage performance where Liam Neeson is swept up in his emotions, where like the cat pisses him off somehow.
Yeah,
he's like,
and then he doesn't get his fucking prize at the carnival, and he just fucking goes on an ape shit fit, dude. Like,
and Ted's just like, why is he just acting like a crazy person? I'm like, well, they say he can't control his emotions, especially anger. And he's like, oh yeah, that's right. But the fact that it's such a throwaway line at the beginning of like the movie that you just forget about it, and it's just like, am I just watching a Nicolas Cage performance or a Gary Busey post head injury performance? You know, like
one of my other negatives that's not too far off of this train of thought is there's a whole lot of like corny tropes in this one.
Especially the main villain. Like the main villain's just a dickhead. No, I'm not talking about Durant. I'm talking about the actual main villain. He's just like a slime ball, like douche.
I wasn't even gonna go there, Matt. Right? I was gonna go to like we have to take the damsel in distress who's all tied up on top of the new construction so you can fight on top of girders and use construction equipment to fight each other, right? Like they even went so far as to pull out the rivet gun to really sell home the idea that like this is a construction site, right? And
which on paper that does sound kind of cool with like the villain trying to use a rivet gun as like a weapon and then fighting on like you can definitely tell like the thought process. They had it fucking like this is gonna be so cool, and then the execution is just
Look, when you watch Die Hard, right, and it's all trapped within the same building, you understand when pieces of that building are under construction, and you can still tell it's still the same building, right? In this one, it's like, hey, everything is happening in this office, coffee shop, apartment, laboratory. All of a sudden, now there's some random abandoned warehouse for Darkman to make his big reveal and do his science in the dark, and then it's like, yeah, but this needs more suspense than the same set. Why don't we just take him on top of a crane onto some girders and then bring him down when the fight's over? Like, it's just so dumb and out of place. It's just, it feels tropey in a way that isn't like campy kind of haha funny. It feels like, yeah, we really do think this is cool. Go do it.
Especially like the village, just like, you don't have it in you to drop me.
Right. Well, yeah, the bad guy goading him on so that he gets dropped, and then you see a character change. Gasp, haven't seen that one before. The idea that like all of this is for the love of a woman who's still gonna take him back despite his disfigured face, a la Beauty and the Beast, right? Like it's
and then he's just like, well, I can't. It's like, well, I'm a changed person now, so I'm just gonna ride off into the sunset
as Bruce Campbell
and be alone.
Yeah, as Bruce Campbell. And then,
yeah, that's Bruce.
Yeah,
that's a positive. That's a positive.
No, it's so frustrating to see him at the end. Like, just cast him if you want to be him so fucking bad. There's no reason that couldn't have been Liam Neeson in a crowd of people turning around, and I'm pissed off about it. Anyway, there's also the whole like, dude, if the big reveal to your movie or whatever script you're writing, viewer at home, if your big giant twist is one of two things, stop, burn it. Just don't ever write anything ever again, right? One of them was, and it's all a dream. The second one is, they pull off their face to reveal that's not actually me. If your storytelling involves either of those two pieces, quit writing anything forever. Forever. Stop it. I hate that that's the trope of I can just be anybody. I put on this mask and it's not who I am. It's corny, watered down Batman. It's garbage. Stop it. Stop it.
I mean, Ted, when I just explained the plot to Ted before he watched it, he goes, so this is Taken and Face Off into one movie. And I'm like, more or less.
It's just, yeah, so, there are two tropes that are unacceptable. Please stop. Please stop.
Christ. I'd say my biggest gripe is suspense of disbelief. Because this movie, like, jumps the shark a couple of times. Especially when, like, Durant is hunting down, Darkman. He's literally blowing up city blocks with a grenade launcher. And I'm just like, I know they said that they paid off the police, but I don't think that they have that much money to pay off the police to ignore a gangster in a helicopter shooting a grenade launcher, blowing up.
Yeah, for it to be such an approachable plot, there are some places where it's like, okay, I can't chew on this, right? So not only was it a grenade launcher blowing up a city, but the dude you're trying to shoot the grenade launcher at is attached to a rope on dangling from a helicopter. You could just cut the fucking rope or drop it low enough that he has no choice but to get hit by a car, right? You don't need to pull out a grenade launcher to fucking blow him up, right? I just there are so many things in this movie that it's like, yeah, this plot is approachable and the storytelling is fine, but the way you choose to go about it is just like, dude, I can't buy into this. It's really dumb.
Yeah. That's literally all I got. Like everything else is okay. Like it's I don't think it's like a terrible movie, but like
yeah, I'm kind of with you. It's not bad, but it's also not good.
Yeah, I mean, this was definitely during a time like where like the only good superhero movies were like Batman and Batman Returns, and everything else was like either mediocre to like god awful. So like, it's not surprising that this isn't like some fucking masterpiece,
It is interesting, though, like, before we jump too many movies ahead, you can certainly see the framework for where Spider-Man comes in for Sam Raimi's catalog. ignoring the hero elements of it, right? Like we can do a serious action thing with a strong story that like has a start to end without letting the goofy get out of us entirely, right? And it's a really good framework for that. It feels like a practice run. See if he can maybe do Spider-Man later, you know?
It almost kind of makes me kind of think like, what if we got the Sam Raimi that we have now, like redid this?
I would find that interesting, right? Again, like if this is the trial run, I think it went pretty well. If had he started with Spider-Man and then tried to write his own and done Darkman, I think Darkman would be a fantastic movie, and Spider-Man wouldn't have gotten 2 sequels, right? Like,
right.
I find it very interesting where this fits into his catalog.
Sequels, even though they're direct to video.
Yeah, okay, great, but we've watched a bunch of other shitty movies with sequels too. That doesn't mean they deserve them.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's interesting where this fits into Raimi's catalog. And the one thing I'll say while we're here before we do rankings is that in all of the other directors we've done so far, by this point we would have established like a very clear style, right? The only real consistencies I'm finding with Raimi's movies are that like
crane shots.
What's that? Well,
crane shots.
Yeah, okay, fine. But like the idea that like, hey, we can make whatever movie we want as long as there's some comic relief. If you can't giggle a little, I'm not making it. Suspense, a decent story that's halfway baked in execution, and fighting with the editor, right? Like it doesn't feel as like concrete as like Christopher Nolan's time jumping, right?
Right.
Or
Tarantino's Feet.
I was gonna say racism, but yeah, Feet works too. It's there are very clear themes in those other directors, and this one kind of feels like broader strokes with the same paintbrush, you know?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like there. I mean, plot wise, there isn't really much similarities with Raimi's stuff, but like there are like certain like camera techniques that he does, and I think also like when it comes to like storytelling, he definitely seems to kind of like throw ideas at a dartboard, and then it seems with each film like he'll do something that improves upon like the previous film, but yet has like other issues along with that. It's like, okay, I'll fix this, and then new issues happen.
Yeah, it feels like the storyboard is strong and then we're losing it, right? Like in every movie we've seen so far, again, maybe outside of Evil Dead, which to this point seems more like a flash in the pan rather than a calculated success. I'm just going to throw that one out there. I think it's the storyboard is really good. We've got a plan, then they just can't execute it, right? I'll be interested to see as things like producers change or different studios get involved or whatever, to see like how this continues to develop to the ones that I'm much more familiar with, like Spider-Man.
Right. I mean, like, it seems like a lot of cases, like every time like I look up something, how Raimi ends up like getting like, you know, noticed by like Universal or like by other like producers and stuff. I know the next one that we're doing is Army of Darkness, but the one after that, The Quick and the Dead, the person that sought Raimi for that movie was actually the lead actress in that movie, Sharon Stone. So it's like people kind of see like what Raimi can like. It's like they see what Raimi has in his head and that he has potential, and they're just like, maybe this is the one where he, you know, pulls it off, you know?
Yeah, I will be interested to see the moment, like which movie in particular where it all just kind of clicks together, right?
I think it's going to be Army of Darkness, because I remember that being really, really good and hilarious, but I also remembered Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 being better than what they were, which that being said, like, I mean, Evil Dead is still really, really good, but Evil Dead 2 not so much.
It's interesting. It's like a crappy car that's been sitting in your driveway for 25 years that your dad swears he's going to fix, right? And now he's finally got it where the engine's almost turning over, but it's still not there, so you know there's a ton of problems left.
What do you mean by 1990 Jeep Wagoneer that still needs the fucking
exactly.
wiring done on it?
Exactly, dude.
Since
It's like you turn the key and it's making sound. It's not close, but you know all the pieces are there, right? Like that's where we're at with this one. And I'm just waiting for that car to start and the engine to kick into gear. Like we're right there.
I'm glad that we actually have like a director where we're kind of interested to see where things go. We haven't really had this since like Nolan.
Even Nolan, I feel like we had the idea and he was just getting better at the thing he already wanted to do, right? Like, he nailed his formula in Memento and he just wanted to do it better now, right? Like, I'm kind of thrilled that we are also 5 movies in and don't feel problematic about him yet. By this point in Tarantino, I was ready to be done. And I know that it's only still going up, which is super exciting. I guess that leads us to rankings. Stallman, what are you doing?
I'm putting this right up below Evil Dead. Evil Dead, is just put together better overall. Just because of like, even though the story itself isn't that like fleshed out, the pieces in the execution are better than they are with this one. I think I'm going to put it in the same spot, but I feel like it's a little tougher, right? Not because I'm trying to put it ahead of Evil Dead, but because I'm having trouble comparing it to Crimewave. No, and I don't mean that like poorly, right? Like I didn't think that little of this movie. No, because like Crimewave kind of had the same thing. You're like, because they're like, there's like a lot of good ideas here. It's just the execution's not that great.
My issue. Well, yes, like so that's still accurate, right? But you can make that argument about all 5, right? Right. I think the issue for me is that like they're just two violently different genres, right? Like this is kind of like an action with some humor thrown in, and Crimewave was what if we tried to remake Airplane, right? Like if you went and saw the fucking Robert Pattinson Batman movies and Airplane back to back and said these were made exactly the same, tell me which one's better, you'd struggle, right? Clearly Airplane's a fucking better movie, but they're so different from each other that it's like I almost don't want to compare them. I will agree with you in the idea that like I think this one had a more solid start, or it's a solid plot, rather. It's the start to where I know Raimi's going to get to. So it feels more thought out, planned, and I guess to some extent better executed. I will say that I think Darkman is a better viewer experience because it's less corny. It's easier to buy into. So I think that's why I'm keeping it second. But those feel closer than I want them to be because they're difficult to compare.
Right.
All right. You got anything before we get out of here?
Next week, like I said before, Army of Darkness, the third of the Evil Dead trilogy.
Perfect. All right. Well, with that, thank you guys for watching. We appreciate you being here. As always, you can watch the movies with us in the Discord on Sundays when we have our shit together. You can watch them with us in the Discord, which should be linked in the description. If you're interested in more of our content, you can find the rest of the movie podcast as well as a whole bunch of other YouTube content right here on this channel. If you're interested in our individual content, Stallman and I are both on Twitch at Traductus and Ted Green Eagles. With that, I think that gets us out of here. We'll see you next week for Army of Darkness.